What's going on YouTube? It's Vinny here, and today I'm going to be showing you guys how to replace a thermostat on a 2007 to 2016 Honda CRV. Alright, I'm going to show you guys what you're going to need for this job. You're going to need a pair of channel lock pliers, clip remover tool, 10mm socket with a ratchet, a coolant funnel, some gloves, some rags, and a oil drain pan. Okay, and then as far as the parts, I would recommend getting 2 jugs of the 50/50 pre-mixed coolant by Honda. Only use the Honda genuine coolant. That's my recommendation. And then the OEM Honda thermostat. Part number will be here. And all the links will be in the descriptions for all of this. The first step for this is going to be to drive the car onto some ramps or try to raise the front end. And then make sure you guys let the engine cool down before you go ahead to the next step. Okay, once you have the front end lifted up and the engine's cooled down, you can go ahead and remove your radiator cap. Make sure the engine is cooled down before you remove the radiator cap, because if it is still hot, there's a very high chance that when you go to open that, the coolant is going to shoot out and burn your skin. So just be very careful. Make sure the engine's cooled down before you take off that radiator cap. All right, the next step is going to be under the car. We're going to remove this plastic undercover. There's just a few clips on each side, and then I believe a 10mm bolt on each side. So we're going to go ahead and do that next. So I can actually leave one side attached if I have to. It should not get in our way. Preferably remove the passenger side. Okay, now we're under the car. With the plastic cover removed, you're gonna look up and you're gonna see this like white knob looking thing. That's the coolant radiator petcock. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna loosen that to drain the coolant out of the car. So if it's too tight to get it off by hand, then what you're gonna do is you can get a pair of needle nose pliers or your channel lock pliers and gently, very gently, put them on there and twist it loose, and then do the rest by hand. And make sure before you start to fully really unscrew this that you have a drain pan under to catch the coolant. And it is going to splash, so make sure you got some eye protection on if you're gonna lay here like I am. So I'm gonna do it very slowly. You're gonna see it starting to come out. It's a good idea to let this drip a little bit, because you do not wanna take that fully out, because then all the coolant's gonna shoot out everywhere and make a big mess. So I'm gonna let this drain and then we'll be back once this is empty. All right, once your coolant is done dripping, you can go ahead and tighten up the petcock. All right, next we're gonna look over and I'm gonna show you guys what the thermostat looks like. So right there is the thermostat, and you see there's 2 bolts on the bottom here. There's also one on the top left. So we're gonna have 3 10mm bolts total. And then you're gonna have that rusty looking clamp right there. That's for the lower radiator hose that attaches to your thermostat. So right now is a good time, if you can, to use some power lube on the bolts, and then we'll get ready to remove the hose from the thermostat first. And that should just make this job go a little bit smoother for you guys. Alrighty, so I'm gonna get my pair of channel lock pliers, get them on that clamp. All right, so I'm squeezing that clamp together. And I just wiggled that clamp a little bit further back off the hose. Just enough to be able to remove the hose. Next, you can take your pliers and open them up so they're like that. And you can go on the hose itself, grab the hose a little bit, very gently squeeze, and you can twist it a little bit like this, which will help break it free from the thermostat. All right, now the next step is gonna be to pull the lower radiator hose off of the thermostat. Now, usually when you do this, there will be some leftover coolant in here. So just a fair warning, you might wanna hold a rag over this, make sure you're wearing glasses, and just be prepared that once this hose comes off, there might be some extra coolant that's gonna drip out. So you can see I'm gonna just use this pry tool just a tiny bit, back the hose off a little bit, and then I can probably get the rest of this by hand. So pull that hose off. All right, and that's all you need to do. You guys can see hose is disconnected. I'm just gonna push that up a little bit, get that out of the way. Next, you're gonna be able to get in there with your 10mm socket, and you're gonna take off all 3 10mm bolts. There's 2 on the bottom and 1 on the top left corner. All right, I'm gonna speed some things up. There's our bolt. And there's our last bolt. Okay, now with that, we should be able to remove the thermostat. I'm gonna wiggle it. Oh, yep, there comes some coolant. That's gonna be the rest of the coolant that's gonna come out of this whole car. So, just gonna wiggle that out. All right, now don't pull it all the way out. You're gonna have one last thing you gotta do. There's a wiring harness clip that's actually attached to it up on the top left. I'm gonna use my clip remover tool, try to get under it to get that off. Also, if you can get behind it, which I really can't, but if you can with like a pair of bent needle nose, you'll be able to pinch that clip and get it out. All right, so there you guys go. Thermostat's disconnected. I'm gonna bring this out and compare to the new one. All right, so here we have our old thermostat and here is our new thermostat. Both are OEM Honda thermostats. Pretty much the same thing I'm seeing on both. See, they have the 3 bolt holes on both, the clip for the wiring harness, and the only difference that I can tell right off of just looking at it is the coloring. This one has like a gold plate looking color thing in here, and this one just seems like it used to be silver, but it got very worn out. So identical item. We're gonna go ahead and take our new one, and you just wanna double check, make sure this gasket is looking good. You wanna make sure it's seated in its channel properly, so when we go to put it in the car, it doesn't leak. And again, the part number for this thermostat, the OEM Honda one, is right here, and there'll also be a link down in the description of this video. All right, next step, once you have that thermostat out, is you just want to wipe everything down, because this is going to be the most room you're going to have, and make sure you wipe off where the thermostat seats onto the engine. Just want to wipe any crud, any debris off of that, make sure it's a nice smooth seal for the new thermostat. That looks pretty good to me. Okay, next step is you're gonna grab your new thermostat here, and the orientation is the 2 bolt holes are along the bottom, then there's 1 bolt hole along the top with that clip for the wiring harness. So you're gonna go ahead and push that in. You might have to push that wiring harness up and out of the way, and it should just sit right in there like that. And then we're gonna go ahead and grab some of our bolts and start threading those in by hand. All right, now I want to show you guys this. There's shoulders that are on these bolts, and that actually sits into the thermostat housing. So when you go to put these in, make sure that the thermostat's actually all the way seated correctly. So when you put them bolts in, you don't snap this plastic housing. Like the flange is what I'm talking about, right around here. You guys can see that that bolt actually goes into that. So just make sure that's in there correctly before you go ahead and crank these bolts down. Now you're gonna torque these bolts down to 8 foot-pounds of torque. All right, once you got your thermostat torqued down to 8 foot-pounds, you're gonna go ahead, reinstall that wiring harness clip. That'll just slide right in that hole and click in. And then next, we can grab our lower radiator hose and get that back onto the thermostat. Just like so. And then all we're gonna do is get our channel locks, and we're gonna wanna pinch that clamp and put it right back into place. Okay, and a good practice and what I like to do is I look at where the clamp used to sit on the hose and I try to put it back in the same spot, so that way I know it should seal it correctly. All right, everything here looks good. Always double check your work. Never just assume that it's right the first time. Don't want this to be leaking after we put brand new coolant in. So all the bolts are torqued, the hose is on, the clamp's on, and that little electrical connection is clipped into the bracket. Okay, everything down here looks good. Make sure the petcock for the radiator is definitely tight. Okay, and then once you double checked and made sure everything is good, The next step's going to be to go up top to fill it up with some coolant. All right, so the next step of this is going to be to get the right fitting to go onto the radiator cap for your coolant funnel. So what I found was this piece right here paired with this piece is what I'm going to use. This one fits in there nicely. So this piece sits in the radiator, and then this piece goes over top the cap like that. And when you twist it on like that, it should lock. And this little piece sticking out should not move. Just to show you guys what it looks like that. And then what goes in there is your coolant funnel. Should sit in there like that. You just push it in, and then what we're gonna do is you can fill it up with some coolant, and then you'll pull this plug out and it'll start funneling its way in. Take our brand new coolant, Honda OEM, and what we're gonna do is fill it up. Okay, gonna pop out the center. Oh yeah, and it's gonna bubble, so I'm gonna kind of hold this there so it's not too much. So I'm gonna fill this up until it stops bubbling out. Another trick people use in the shop is they'll lay a rag over it, so as it bubbles like that, it doesn't splash out all over the engine. So it looks like it's gonna stop taking coolant. I'm gonna add a little more just to fill up the bottom of the funnel. Now what I like to do is I like to reach around here, and you'll see the upper radiator hose right here. Give it a couple squeezes. You might see a little bit of air bubbles coming out, and that's good. And the coolant level should drop, which means the engine's taking in more coolant. And basically what we gotta do now is just bleed the system of all the air. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna turn the car on, we're gonna put the heat on full blast and turn the air all the way up, and then let the engine run for a while to help burp the system, get all the air bubbles out of the engine and replace it with the coolant as it should be. And you'll notice that this coolant level will keep going down, so you might have to keep adding some more coolant. And meanwhile, you'll also start to feel inside the car that the heat gets a lot more hot, and that's how you know that you've gotten most of the air out of your coolant system. All right, so I'm gonna go in the car and show you guys how to set it all up. Just make sure there's nothing that's gonna fall into the engine when you start the car. I'm gonna go ahead and start the car. All right, you're gonna turn the heat all the way to full blast, and then turn your blower all the way on, full blast, and keep it on the face. That's gonna blow out the top. You can feel the air. You're gonna let that go. You're gonna look at your coolant. All right, this is gonna start bubbling. As the engine warms up and the fans kick on, it's gonna cycle, which is gonna heat the coolant up in the engine. It's gonna get hot enough so it can pass through, open the thermostat, and pass through the whole radiator. And you're gonna see the air bubbles coming out like this. So I'm gonna let this sit here for like probably 10 or 15 minutes. I'm gonna keep an eye on this coolant and add more as needed. All right, so now while we're letting the engine run, heat up, and letting the air bleed out of the coolant system, now's a great time to go under the vehicle, double check, make sure nothing's leaking, and then you guys can go ahead and replace that plastic undercover. All right, once you guys hear the fans kick on, that means the coolant's starting to cycle through, and you'll be able to look and see some little bubbles sometimes coming from up here. As you can also see, the coolant level's going down, so I'm gonna add some more. So while you're bleeding the car, sometimes this process can take a long time, so to help speed things up, what you guys can do is get in the vehicle and hold the engine RPMs up to 3,000, and then you'll notice that the engine will start to heat up a little quicker. I'm gonna hold it right around 3,000, and you can do this for like 5 to 10 minutes, and it should not harm the engine at all. And this will help kind of speed the process up. And so by doing that, what you're doing is basically you're heating the engine up quicker, and that's going to create the cycle for the coolant to cycle through the engine and then through the radiator, and you want that to happen at least twice to hopefully get most of the air out of the system. The longer you do this, the more air you'll be able to bleed out of the system. And the more air that's out of the system, the hotter your air will come out of your vents. So you'll know when most of the air is out by the temperature of your vents. All right, and then once you're done bleeding the air out of the system, the last thing to make sure you do is to top off your coolant reservoir, which I'll show you guys is right here. All you're gonna have to do is unscrew the cap, pull that out, and you can actually stick this funnel in there to fill it back up. You can look along the edge, and there's a fill line. That's the line you want to fill it up to. All right, guys, and that pretty much wraps it up. That's how you install a thermostat on a 2007 to 2016 Honda CRV. If you guys have any questions, you can leave them down below in the comments. I will get back to you. If you guys are looking for any of the parts used or any of the tools used, there'll be links down in the description for that. And if this helped you guys out, please leave me a like, because that really helps me out. And if you guys are looking for more of this kind of content, hit that subscribe button, because there'll be plenty of more videos coming your way. I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.